This is the fourth edition of the Canadian Home Studio Tour from Folk Music Ontario. My name is Joel Elliott, and I'm here with Murray Pulver. Hi, Murray.
Hey, Joel, and hi, everybody else out there.
We will talk all about Murray's career and what he's up to and how he creates tunes. But first, I want to thank our sponsors, particularly SOCAN, Factor, Ontario Creates, the Ontario Arts Council, and Canadian Heritage. Also, I don't know where you're listening from, but here in Ottawa, we broadcast from the traditional and unceded lands of the Algonquin, Anishinaabe peoples. Murray, put on your embarrassed hat because I'm going to read off a list of your accomplishments now. He's got his embarrassed hat on. Named Western Canadian Musician of the Year in 03 and 06, an accomplished musician who's worked in many different situations, including performances with chamber orchestras, numerous local and international acts, countless recording sessions, scoring music for national TV and film, and for the last several years, producing many award-winning and critically acclaimed recording projects. You've recorded with some of the best producers and engineers in the world, including Just Niebank, Terry Manning, Ken Nelson, Jim Scott, in studios around the world, in Nashville, Bahamas, London. Murray, oh my goodness. Just
man, I want to go to some of those places right now.
Oh my goodness. So our friends are aware, you are based in Winnipeg?
I'm based in Winnipeg, yeah, I know. Unlikely place for many.
Well, an unlikely place, and yet it happened for you because let's talk about your career overview before we get to, pandemic nonsense. But in the 90s, you're tickling my 90s kid heart, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
You're tickling my 90s kid heart. You played with the Crash Test Dummies and toured about the world after their Worms Life album came out, and shared stages with Alanis and No Doubt and Ashley McIsaac. A lot of people aren't aware that the Crash Test Dummies were Canadian, let alone from the Peg. So
from the Peg, yeah.
From the Peg. Let's start there. What were you doing as a musician before you hooked up with them, and how'd you get hooked up with them?
Yeah. I was like early 20s. I kind of took every gig imaginable. I was just, young, gung-ho. I wanted to do everything I could, meet as many people as possible, and I played, every kind of gig imaginable, every, style I tried anyway. And I'm, learned a lot of things. Maybe I shouldn't play jazz gigs or whatever, but what I ended up doing was a friend was recording a demo, and she insisted that I play guitar. And luckily, she did it at this studio just a street over from me where I live now. And it happened to be Brad Roberts, the lead singer of Crash Test Dummies studio. And it was called God of Thunder. and he basically, the studio was kind of in the basement, but the control room was up in the dining room. And so he'd come down and, grab his coffee and stuff in the morning, and he'd hear me, and he could see me through video, I guess, playing guitar, and that's how we met. And we just sort of talked about, music, and anytime I came upstairs, and that was the first meeting. And then he saw me play around town a little, a few times, and the next thing you know, like, I got a call from a friend who was recording all his demos while the Dummies were living in London, England, and he said, "Hey man, I think Brad Roberts is going to call you and wants you to audition for the band, and he's going to fly you to London, and you're going to and I was like, yeah, right, as if, and I was there in London for 10 days, and I ended up, rehearsing with the band for live shows, but they were rehearsing a whole new record, which was a Worms Life, like you mentioned, and there was a lot of guitar on that record, so I ended up playing some parts that they really liked, and they ended up flying me. This all sounds dreamlike. Trust me, I don't think this stuff happens much anymore. But they flew me to the Bahamas and to record at Compass Point Studios with Terry Manning, who, has recorded, the Stones and AC/DC and Lenny Kravitz, everybody. And there I was, this 23-year-old kid, recording in the Bahamas for 10 days. Actually, I was there for 2 weeks because they were behind. So, that stuff doesn't happen anymore. So that was
this was the mid 90s, right? So, like, after that album came out, were you then on the road? Like, what happened after that?
yeah, so we made the record, and then I was on the road with them I was with them for about 4 years after that. And so yeah, we toured, man, I played places I never thought I'd play. South Africa, China, all through Europe. And yeah, as a kid from a small town, or outside of Winnipeg here, it was pretty nutty, like freaky.
Well, it's pretty nutty at like that you're part of that big group and like, the 90s and you're in the peg, I assume. And then there's this other group that isn't, let's say, 90s rock alternative, but more country, and it gets really big. Doc Walker, how'd you get hooked up with that duo?
Another wild story. I'm from a little town called Portage la Prairie, and I used to go to Chris and Dave were the main guys in Doc Walker at that time, and I used to teach them guitar because I went to school with their sisters, and so being from a small town, we all knew each other and into music, and so I ended up playing on a few of their records, like their early first two records. And then it just sort of morphed into, hey, do you want to come play some gigs with us? Say, do you want to write some songs with us? Do you want to tour? Yeah, all that stuff sort of happened. And then that turned into, what I was like, oh, yeah, I'll talk to my wife. Maybe we'll do it for about 2 years, see where it goes. And, it was probably about 10 or 11 years later.
Yeah, 10 or 11. And not just that, you're part of the group when they win Group of the Year for the Canadian Country Music Association 4 times, a number of numerous other videos, top 5 singles, rave reviews. Did Doc Walker do much tour in the States as well?
You know what? We never did. I lived down in Nashville for 3 years and kind of did some studio stuff there, but it never really panned out for us down south. We did lots of showcases there for record companies, etc. But we had a lot of success in Australia. Went there a couple times, and but mostly Canadian based. Like that's where most of our success was. Yeah.
Within the Commonwealth. That's all right, my friend.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. Yeah.
Keeping it within the Commonwealth. So it is no longer the 20, or I guess 2000s, or even the 2010s. You had Crash Test Dummies, you had Doc Walker. You're doing, I assume, other sit-in recordings throughout the 2010s, working with other artists. Leading up into the pandemic, where were you at? Were you touring? Were you gigging? Were you writing? Were you producing? Where were you at generally when all that went down?
Yeah. You know what? I generally, over the last few years, have sort of concentrated mostly on production and some live gigs here around the city, just keep the chops up and for fun. But yeah, so I was very, very lucky during the pandemic beginnings. Because I was in a bit of a bubble with a great artist named Steve Bell from the city here. And I work a lot at his studio. It's called Signpost Music. And it's generally where I do a lot of work besides, just doing stuff here at home. And so luckily it was really the two of us and also Steve's kind of partner engineer, business partner engineer. So we had this bubble going on because we had started the record. And then we just kept making that record because it was like, well, it's just us. And I think we can keep doing this. There weren't really those kind of regulations. The only thing is that we're very much used to working with, a band or hiring musicians for playing on the recording, but it really created a different scenario for us and also a different sort of way of making a record for Steve, for sure, and myself. Steve ended up playing a lot of everything, and doing things that he normally wouldn't do. And we just got creative with it. And we did a lot of farming out for, different parts and stuff, say, be it if we wanted some violin or cello or whatever, we'd kind of farm it up. And it was kind of like Christmas when you get that back, it's like, oh, what are we going to get, and pretty exciting. So it was a really different way of making the record for Steve, especially. And you know what? I'll blab a lot, so sorry. Another wild thing that sort of happened when the pandemic started is I felt like there was a lot of panic amongst artists who were like, oh my, right now is the time I can make some music. Can you help me. I know we can't get together, but can we start recording? And so during the early mornings, I would come downstairs and start like working on people's tracks or even co-writing. Then I'd go to Signpost and do some recording with Steve during the day. So it was actually, I got very lucky and was in this creative kind of crazy bubble for a while, and it was super gratifying and also, yeah, it just was a very creative time. But it also had its, you can burn out of that too. And I did feel it around May. It was just like, oh, hit by a brick wall.
Yeah. It can be hard. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a very good wild experience, making music in a very different way when the pandemic hit. And the crazy thing was, I actually was home at 5 every night eating dinner with my family. Very bizarre concept around this household anyway. So
yeah, that's not the artist's schedule too.
That's for sure.
I'm interested, like you mentioned, like farming out things that you normally wouldn't. I don't know much about the music scene in Winnipeg. What's happening there in general? Let's say in like non-pandemic times. What's happening?
I think the music scene in Winnipeg, I find to be super vibrant. A lot of incredible players, and I don't know what that's attributed to. People say, oh, it's the cold winters and there's nothing else to do but learn an instrument. But I feel like there's a really great sense of community here, and there's a lot of sharing, and there's a lot of respect for maybe older players and stuff, and people sort of grow up watching great music in this city, and they feel like there's this level to sort of live up to or achieve or go beyond, and we're very isolated here, and so I kind of think that contributes too, because I feel there's a lot of people that just a lot of artists that just are free to be themselves. They're not concerned about what's happening in the music industry or what's happening in the big cities, just because we're not part of that whole scene. And so I feel it creates a lot of really individual, artists that sound like nothing else, and that's my sort of take on the Winnipeg scene. People don't sort of care to sound like somebody else. They're concerned about just being themselves. And to me, that's really exciting. And to be part of that's pretty, I feel very lucky.
Well, let's talk about how you can be really lucky and work with those vibrant new artists, because you said you focused a lot on producing in the past few years, a lot, and it sounds like you work out of your home, which allows you to be like pretty nimble during the pandemic. But what type of genres do you work with? What type of artists do you stick with one? Do you try all kinds of new things to learn new stuff? How do you do it?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, a lot of people know me or will sort of you relate to me because I've got this country music thing. So I do a lot of young country artists or co-writing with artists and recording them. I'm kind of known, I guess, because the Doc Walker thing as this country sort of person. And but I grew up playing a lot of like R&B and soul stuff, and huge pop music fan, and I just feel like I love everything. So I actually have, I feel my clients are all over the place, to be honest. And I do a lot of folk stuff. Winnipeg is definitely a very folk town, and yeah, it kind of started early, and it the Brothers Landreth are a band that really sort of helped elevate my production sort of status, I guess, and people sort of start taking notice of that, and that really helped with future clients and getting clients, and just yeah, I don't know. For me, I guess I probably veered off this what you asked me, but I feel like as a producer, for me, it's about getting to know the person, getting to know the client, their music, their influences, where they come from, what they want to achieve. And I feel like the most important part is if you know the artist, you're just there as a sort of vessel to sort of help them achieve who the best version of themselves, you know. And because I feel like there's a lot of producers out there these days, or you hear a lot of producer on the radio these days, if that makes sense, and you don't hear sometimes enough artists, is my opinion. And so I kind of really, my philosophy, I guess, about production would be that let's try and find the best version of yourself. And you know, I think that always, you know, that's the only way you can really have success too, is sort of being the best version of yourself and selling that, you know.
I like to ask this too, like, because people are coming to you for your expertise. I mean, you've seen things over the decades and played a long time, but are any of these young artists, you're like, you must be learning some things or being surprised by them as well, right?
Oh, I learn something every day. I feel like a complete moron. Like I am, you know, I am not the most technically minded producer there is at all. My concern is always music first. And man, I can't stand the headaches of when things don't go right, you know, gear wise. I mean, I kind of go with what I can get by with, but yeah, it's like I'm so you know, I've lost what you said initially.
Learning from the younger.
Yeah, and so I've worked, especially lately, with a lot of young artists, and man, these kids have grown up making computer-based music for like since they were 12, and they're just flying around stuff, and I'm just like, oh my, this is. But you know what? That's their lane, and I know my lane. And I kind of try and stick in my lane and see if we can make it work together. And I've been doing a lot of work, you know, with some young producers too, where I, you know, I know what they're great at, what they can bring to it, but they're something they may not have had enough experience with is, you know, working with others and trying to figure out that thing about the artist that makes them special. And like I said, you hear a lot of producer, and there's like amazing talents out there. But you really need to connect with the artist, and you need to connect or find a way for the artist to connect with, you know, the listener. So yeah, I'm learning stuff all the time. And so some things I learn, I just go, you know what? You're amazing at that. I think I'm going to send that to you to work on. So I've got a few people that help me out achieve, you know, the hip factor if I don't always have it.
What about new things in folk and country? Like you said, that's sort of your lane, but you know, anything hip happening that you've noticed in those particular genres over the past little while?
Well, man, with the folk, like in folk music, I find like there's just so much interesting sounds coming these days. You know, like the typical folk artist is, I think, not much. It's a thing of the past, you know. And the way people are creating sounds and you know, be it by computer based you know, ways or just, you know, being super creative. And there's unbelievable artists out there, and you know, in country too. Like it's also there's a lot of computer based stuff going on, and you know, I mean, what is country music these days? I mean, it's, you know, lucky for me, there's a lot of still 80s influence in it. So luckily I was a child, you know, in the 80s, so I can sort of really relate. But yeah, I don't know about, you know, there's different trends for different things, but I feel like artists are just way more, I don't know, they're willing to sort of shed the sort of stigma of whatever folk music is or whatever. Like it's anything, right? I feel like there's so much freedom, and I just worked on a very cool project for Folk Music Canada, which was they paired, you probably know about this, they paired 10 Canadian artists with, or 9 Canadian artists with 9 international artists. And the way everybody works is so different, you know, and I was trying to you know, keep track of everyone, but
who'd you get paired up with?
I was paired up with all the artists actually. So yeah, well, I was kind of considered producer, but not everybody required, you know, my help. You know, some people really wanted help just with arrangement and, some ideas. I worked with really cool two duos, Pixik and Vilda from Norway, I think they are, and very different. Like Pixik does, throat singing, and Vilda is an accordionist with someone who sings in the Sami language, Joik it's called. Wow. And so they paired these four people up. Wow. And it was so funny. Like I got a call from one of the girls at Pixik, and she says, so yeah, none of us really write songs. We kind of come up with these jams and stuff. And it's like, can you sort of come up with a track, and then like just a very basic track for them to sort of jam on? And so I came up with something. They luckily liked it, and Pixik did their thing, and then Vilda did their thing, and it was just like unbelievable, kind of mind blowing. It became this sort of cinematic piece that was, what is it? What kind of music is it? Folk is just such an open,
Well, that leads to one last question about this before we get into your recording process. Go away, phone.
Water band.
So popular. And it's gone. It's gone. So, like you were recording in the 90s, right? And touring in the 90s, and now you're seeing all these new artists literally influenced and collaborating with people from all over the planet. Like, and again, I'm a 90s kid. You said you're an 80s kid, but back then I listened to whatever was on the radio. Young folk can be influenced by everything. Isn't that amazing?
It actually is mind blowing. Like anything you want to hear is instant. You can hear it in an instant. Anything that piques your interest, you can find it. It's not like you have to run to the record store and go, oh, have you ever heard of this band? And of course not. It'll take me half a year to get the record. Now everything is instant, and I think that's maybe when we were talking about what folk music or what's influencing all these things. It's just like everything is influencing it now. You go, oh man, I love this hip hop thing, this groove. Well, that can totally be under some sort of violin or fiddle thing, and some you got that with tenor banjo or something. It's like I love that people are finding that it's limitless, and really, as what music should be, and communication and art should be. And but you're right, like we have access to anything at any moment, and also the knowledge on how to do it. So you get these people, you can watch a YouTube video on how to record blah blah blah, or what mic should I use for this, or what like it's mind blowing, the things we just didn't have back then. And like I said, I've been making computer based music for the last 15, 20 years. But before that, when I first brought a project and said you got to use Pro Tools, and I was like, what? I can't do it. No, you'll have to get somebody else. And they said, well, it pays. It's like $6,000. And I'm like, oh, okay, I can do it.
I can do that.
Yeah, I'll learn pretty quick. Yeah,
when we have to, I guess, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, so let's talk about your gear. You said you do some production at home. What exactly do you offer there? Do you do some recording? Do you do some just, hey, try this? What's your typical thing going on?
So it really depends on the project, of course. If I'm doing an album with a band, or so say the Brothers Landreth here, for example, I'll go to a place, of course, where I love making music with different people. Like I feel, sure, home recording is awesome, but there's nothing like making music with others. So that's typically my favorite. So we've been lucky during the pandemic to, hear that we've had some times where Manitoba's been okay, and we've been able to make music in a studio, and that's my preferred way of making music. And I like to feel like a kid again, and like getting in there and jamming, with in the garage with a band or an artist. And so because there's nothing like it to me. Like I feel like you got to get to the heart of the song first, and you got to get to know the artist and make suggestions. And so I kind of typically will do that, get to the point where we feel the songs are bulletproof. Then we think about recording and go into a studio. We'll do, our bed tracks or whatever, and some vocals and, overdubs, guitar overdubs or whatever. And then I typically take projects home and I'll work, like I've got a Universal Audio Apollo Twin, nothing fancy, but it can do pretty much anything. It's pretty amazing. And you get yourself an environment where it's like, I think investing, if you're going to invest in something, some speakers, like really good speakers, and it's, to me, where you feel like you are getting a true sense of what's coming out. And it takes a long time to sort of figure that out and see what you like listening to, and what, every speaker sort of is different. And so anyway, I'll bring stuff home, and I do a lot of editing at home, of course. And then I record a lot of guitars here at home. So because I play primarily guitar, I've got, several, at any point I could use. Like I said, it's also community. Winnipeg is great community. So if anything I ever need to borrow, it's pretty much, around with some friends or whatever. I record, I have several amps here. You probably can't see them, but one thing I've been using is this aux box, Universal Audio aux box, which is, I think, one of the best. I'm getting a drink delivered. So.
Oh my! What an interview!
What did I get? One berry hibiscus refresher for hot days.
Cheers from across the province here from.
Yeah. So I, because I can't. At home, recording at home, I can't blast guitars. I have a family and neighbors that I stay friendly with. I've discovered, I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's a product. It's kind of like, it's a bit of a speaker simulator. And I think it's the best piece of gear made for guitar players in the last while. And what it will do is I can pretty much get my magic sound on my amp, which might mean turning it to 11. But I can use the aux box it'll just come through my DAW, which I use Pro Tools, and I can have it at, the smallest level, or at headphone level, and not have to worry about anybody hearing my mistakes. Or
so is that like a thing with a compressor built in to go into?
There's not a compressor built in, but and I could compress it, with a plug-in or whatever if I needed. But it's basically like, it's also a load box, which means, again, I can set my amp, to its dream sound, but I can suck the power down. And so it's just a great piece of gear for recording guitar at a studio or at home. And I would never, it actually hooks up to your iPad as well. So you can do things like, I want to pick this cabinet, and I want to, put carpet underneath it, and I can choose which microphones I want to use. And it's unbelievable, the choices. And so it's made recording guitars at home, which I often do for others, or projects that I produce. It's made it so effortless, and also just, man, I get sounds that I could never do if I would work probably 2 hours on trying to get a guitar sound that they've put the time in, trying to get. So I just find it's unbelievable for me as a recording, as a producer at home.
I think and what I've heard from people and what we've seen in past episodes of this is that people who are looking to, hey, I got songs in my head, I want to lay down a scratch, man, but I don't have $4,000 worth of gear. It's like, you don't need $4,000.
No, you need a good imagination. You need, GarageBand is amazing. I get tracks from people all the time that are using GarageBand, and man, they're getting amazing results. And so you need a good laptop. I mean, you can do. I have another girl. She's a bit of an indie artist, and she's doing it all on her Zoom recorder. Like, Yeah, it's crazy, but what she, like, you're pushed by your limitations, right? And you come up with, just look at the 4-track when I was a kid using that, it's just like, but I want more. And so you found ways of getting more, and yeah, it's just all about sort of running with your creative juices and seeing what you can come up with. I don't think you ever, I often read magazines or whatever and go, oh, I need that, I want that. But our reality is also very sometimes not always, can't live up to that, those things that we want and need.
Well, that's an interesting talk, like, because again, like, it's become easier and easier, as you said, like with tools like that Oxbox in the background, as well as in professional studios, which pop, like in literally any city you go to, there's a professional sounding studio where you can get the results you need. Mm-hmm. Where are we going in the future? Because it used to be that you had to roll to LA or to Nashville or to Tino, for example, to get sound. Do you see people traveling more for specific producers or for rather than specific studios in the future? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it could be either, to be honest. To me, everything is always about people and who you connect with and who you like working with and who inspires you. So if you're an artist, and you really loving this, everything that this one person's producing, and you seek that person out. But if there's just not a connection with them, I would recommend you don't make music with them. You really have to connect with somebody who gets you and is going to go the extra mile for you. And so to me, it's always a people first, and then studio second. It's got to be an inspiring place. So sometimes you can have all the bells and whistles, but if that can also feel kind of sterile. I feel like music needs a bit of, grime and grease. Like, to me, I've always loved music that has a bit of grime and grease. And I always feel like it comes from a place that has vibe, and you can have the most amazing studio with every piece of gear that is, it's pristine. But if the people there haven't created an environment, either just by who they are, as people, it can feel like, oh, I don't want to even touch that because it's too nice. I feel like everything is about what the people create and what kind of vibe. Like, when I work at Signpost, it's a very much a small project studio, but pretty much everybody feels really comfortable there, and it's just like a cedar little place from the 70s, but it's got tons of character and people feel comfortable there. And that's, as an artist, you have to feel comfortable because you're putting your heart out there, and so be that your bedroom closet, if that makes you comfortable, then I'm sure you can find a way to make a killer record in there. And people have, look at Billie Eilish. I mean, like, her and her brother making a multi-Grammy winning record in her brother's bedroom. But he's a genius, like, he just really creative. And to me, that is everything. You just have to, and she was super comfortable with him, right? If they went to some studio, I can't actually see them ever going to a studio and looking for another producer, just because of the synergy they have and the relationship they have. I mean, that is everything, and artists I work with, we develop relationship first. And once we feel really comfortable with that, then we start making music. And I think that's everything. And then you also discuss, well, where do we want to make music that, we both feel comfortable in and we feel will be right for the project. So always, try and seek out what you feel is best for your whole scenario. Man, I blab a lot. Jeez.
No, that's great, man.
I'd hate to watch this back. I'll be like, oh man, why'd you say that?
Oh, we contacted you to blab a lot. That's why you're here.
Yeah.
That's interesting though, the people aspect. And on the one hand, and I've heard like industry professionals and artists throughout this pandemic talk about it. On the one hand, we're away from one another. On the other hand, it's sort of easier to connect with people you might not have either like connected with before. Have you noticed that through this pandemic?
That's actually very true. Yeah. And it's funny, like, I did not know you before this. We've never been face to face, but I feel very comfortable with you. Isn't that funny? Like, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually, and going, I don't know what it is about this, but we're very cordial with each other, but it's also like, it's just decent. I'm really enjoying writing with people also over Zoom or whatever, and that's been great, because normally we would have to get together. I'm writing with people that I never would have written with before, or we wouldn't have been. It would have been very unlikely we'd be in the same place, right. And living in Nashville, I realized, like it's great. You found your comfy people that you liked writing with, and you find because you were in the same room together. But I actually have loved writing like this, and I think we've had some really great results. And yeah, it's mind blowing. And this Folk Music Canada project, everybody had to, of course, write, via Zoom or whatever,
cross-culturally even.
Yeah, but you know what? Everybody sort of did it differently, and realized, like, well, you don't have to put a time limit on this either. Sometimes when you're writing with somebody in person, they're only there for a few hours, then they're bolting on a plane. Right. This way, like, well, we can revisit. Like, how about tomorrow? If you come up with a lyric for the second verse, let's just revisit.
I like that aspect of it too. Plus, like, take the travel time out. No, I don't want to come from Ottawa to Nashville to talk about hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
On the Zoom.
And the other thing, like last night, I was writing with a friend in Montreal, and both of us were kind of like realized we were kind of zonked and not, really into it. And it's not that we usually have a great time writing, but sometimes the juices just aren't there, And when you're in person, you feel like you have to be on all this time, but it can almost be detrimental, because I always feel like art can't be forced, and so this kind of allows this back and forth with, we could connect. You say you and I want to write a song, but we're not feeling it right now. But at 2:00, you're going to be like, "Hey, Murray, I got this idea," and I'd be like, "Sure, let's hit it."
And I could even, like, I'll take my Zoom recorder and here's what I'm thinking, and then you get it 2 minutes later on your phone. Hey, I'm out and about, but I'll check. It's what a world.
Yeah. I think it'll change how we do things. Well, clearly from now on, but I mean, like I said, there's nothing about the synergy of being in a room together, a sweaty bunch of people making music. But in the meantime, this is pretty great, and it will change how we move forward. And what's cool is, like you said, I feel like a lot of artists are going to connect with producers or engineers or who they normally wouldn't have. They can develop a relationship like this, and whereas, it used to be a record company said, well, you're going to get this producer because he's the dude or she's the dude, the person that's going to be take your career to, the heights that you need it to be. But they might get together and it just be a complete catastrophe. Like, if they don't get along, sure, this producer might have produced, giant records, but it doesn't mean he or she's going to produce your giant record.
Producing Slayer, not so much for folk music,
Yeah. Whoops.
Actually, I mentioned metal because sort of like the making music without meeting people thing. I've heard of it before. Like, I've heard of it in the metal scene, so and so is a session drummer. He lays down the track. So and so from Norway lays down the guitar. They never meet. The album is released. And when I first heard about that, I thought, that's strange. But now it's doable. I actually love it. Like, I love that part of it. And like I said, this Folk Music Canada thing was all that, never meeting. Yet, but having the trust in the others, or you just seek out who exactly you're looking for. Like, there's now things, what's it called?
Oh, Murray, so bad. But there's this web. Was it soundbetter.com? Do you know about that?
Maybe I've not heard of it, but
That for all you people out there, if you're out there, if there are any out there,
Goggling.
they'll watch it later. Somebody's going to watch it. Soundbetter.com, I believe it is this site where you can create a profile. Say I'm going to promote myself as a session guitar player. There are people on there, be it string arrangers, string players, drummers, producers, everybody that you could imagine is on there. And they have a profile you can listen to work they've done. Say you want somebody to mix your project, but you're like, oh, I don't really know anybody that I feel is right for my music. You can go on Soundbetter and discover there's some greats on there, like heavy hitters, and some people working their way up that might be like a little more cost effective, that are unbelievable talents, and you can connect through that. Like I needed a string arrangement for something, and when the pandemic first hit, and I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to get a quartet in the studio. Like I just can't do it. So I looked up Soundbetter, and I found this arranger in Kansas City that I really loved his arrangements, and he could play all the parts, like he could play all the strings, and I was just like, it was unbelievable, and the price was amazing. And check it out, soundbetter.com. You can get lost for days on it, sort of seeking out different people, and I find it super helpful for in a time like this where you're like wanting to be inspired, and you want, you're just looking for a certain sound for whatever you're doing.
I'll toss that in the YouTube description links to be sure. Murray, I'm very pleased you talked a lot, because we're coming to the end of the presentation. For the very last question, you mentioned the love of being in a room with other sweaty people and making music. You've played stages all over the world. What are you missing about the stage right now?
Oh yeah, I know. That is there's nothing like that. Nothing like that high you get from being in a room or an outdoor festival or something with people. You're all in it together, as the saying goes this year. But in that sense, there's such an energy when you're playing with people you love, and you're playing music that you love, and you're playing for people who love it. There's nothing like that. And I've played a few little gigs last summer. I actually loved it. We did tons of house concerts, like sort of outdoor house concerts. Kind of became the thing in Winnipeg last year. And but it's still, it's not the same. But I haven't played really a gig in quite, probably a year, and or close to it. And yeah, it's just there's something about the hang, with your other musician friends that you have a great connection with, both on and off the stage, and just connecting. I feel like audiences just are so thirsty for it, and I hope they come back in droves. I actually feel like after all this, like there's going to be such a huge resurgence in live shows, and I hope. I can't predict the future, but
well, I think
sure is people have a thirst for it.
I think people it'll be shut down for a while because people will be hugging enthusiastically. They could not hug, or I think, and then festivals. Finally, my friend, on the horizon, we're all hoping for the opening. You're in another province, so I'm not sure where Manitoba's at right now. You got anything in the hopper, or anywhere you'd like our listeners to visit you online, for example?
Well, I do have a website that is very well unattended by me. It's murraypulver.com, and I will get to it. It'll be it's going to be something. I should have got to it during this whole
beautiful website.
But I will start promoting some things that I've been doing. A lot of it's production work. Like been working on a new Brothers Landreth record, which I'm really excited about. Young great artist Sebastian Gaskin we're just finishing up his record, and And oh man, lots of singles, and people are working on lots of projects that I've been very fortunate to be part of during this whole thing, and I'll try and put them on my website. I've been terrible with Instagram and everything. I've kind of been overwhelmed by the world, I guess, in some ways. I just kind of don't want to see things.
That's fair. That's fair. You'll see Murray online, my friends, or hey, if you're in the Peg, go hang out by signposts and maybe you'll see him wandering about.
There you go. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Friends, I've been speaking with Murray Pulver, amazing musician based out of Winnipeg. Thanks for joining us, Murray. It's been great.
Joel, yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been fun.